curious how soon you might catch on to what I'm talking about. So, 1980s, I believe 86, at just 1 in the morning or so, routine safety check in a small town in Ukraine. Anyone yet? Chernobyl. Yeah, Chernobyl. So they're doing a safety check in the middle of the night, and everything goes wrong. So what they do is they want to make sure that if there was ever a surge, they want to know how everything's going to run, and if everything's going to run smoothly and things will shut down nice instead of exploding. So they're doing the safety check, and to quicken things along, they shut off the safety system, which apparently is like doing a test on a car and crashing the car, but having to shut off the airbags because you want to test the car. So they shut that off, which is kind of strange. And as they keep going, they notice things aren't really working right, so they start turning off other things, which is your car's having problems, so you start pulling out the brakes. And so then, instead of things shutting down, there was an explosion. And fireballs came out of this nuclear power plant, bursting through the roof. And firemen would come in, and they weren't told that these fireballs and all this debris was radioactive material, poisonous material, so they're picking it up with their hands, they're moving stuff along. These firefighters end up dying, but not immediately, after a few weeks. It says they burned from the inside out. So people had died, a few died instantly from the explosion, but then many actually died after the fact. And they took about 36 hours to notify the public and evacuate, which meant 36 hours for all this poisonous air to spread all over and cause cancer and all these problems. I mean, just devastating thing. Some people predict or believe that this is what really caused the fall of the Soviet Union, because it was just a few years later, it'd be the fall of the Soviet Union, but Chernobyl right before that. What in the world? So my point in bringing this up is that it seems like it was just such a small mistake, maybe just a couple small mistakes, something that's so easy to do. You're doing a routine. It's the middle of the night. I know, because last night, around 1 in the morning, Ivy's waking me up. And I'm not thinking straight at 1 in the morning. Who's thinking straight at 1 in the morning? It's easy to make simple mistakes. And yet sometimes in history, simple little mistakes, praise God that 99.9% of the times when we make simple, easy little mistakes, the consequences are pretty manageable. But every so often, simple, little, easy mistakes have devastating consequences that affect generations and even nations. So we're in the middle of Genesis chapter 3. And I can't think of a smaller, more innocent, simple mistake as taking a bite of fruit. I mean, fruit, we're crying out loud. I mean, what kind of simple, easy mistake? It wasn't like it was chocolate or something. It was fruit that they ate. I mean, and yet the devastating effects of that. So today we're going to continue on in God's lament. Last week we were talking about the curse on the snake and the promise of victory. That the seed of the woman would have victory not over the seed of the snake, but victory over the snake himself, the very source of evil, the deceiver himself. The seed of the woman. We anticipate that seed of the woman Well, we're going to continue on. And now we're going to go into a lot more of the judgment and the consequences. And we remember as we read this, that this is God's lament. But we still wonder, we ask these questions that maybe you've asked when you first heard the stories. God, are you overreacting here? I mean, it was just fruit. God, are you kind of volatile? Unpredictable? What kind of God do we serve? What kind of God do we worship? Do we worship a God that, most of the time is cool with us, but then every so often he loses his temper and you've got to, back away? What image of God do you think of when you hear these consequences? So now we're going to go to verse 16, chapter 3, 16. As we consider these things, he addresses the woman. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. Do you remember Genesis 1? He blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. So now, they're called to multiply. Now God says, I'm going to multiply. Not good stuff, but the pain. Multiply pain in childbearing, and in pain you shall bring forth children. Okay, so there are two notes I want to make about some of the original words here, and we end up reading it with a slightly different impression than maybe what the author had intended, okay? So, the word for pain might be better translated toil. It's the same word we'll find later when he addresses Adam. And he talks about, in toil you're going to work the ground. It's that kind of word, toil, which isn't always physical pain. It could be emotional, agony, difficulty, anxiety, worry. And the word for childbearing, we see that word all throughout the Bible, and it's almost always used to refer to conception, not labor. Whenever I've read this, I always thought, okay, women are going to have a painful time in labor, but it actually seems as though what God is doing is he's actually talking about something much broader. It's not just solely labor he's talking about. He's talking about the toil of all of it, from conception to raising a child, all the way, and everything in between. There's toil, there's agony, there's things to worry about, there's difficulty in that. And so this matches his word to Adam and saying, with toil you're going to work the ground, there'll be thorns and thistles. And so Eve's domain of being fruitful and multiply and bring productivity and increase into the world, her job is going to be met with lots of toil and difficulty and anxiety and pain. And Adam's of working the ground and bringing food is going to be met with pain and agony and toil. There's a reason why I take it this way, and I do like seeing it like that as something much more broad than just physical pain and labor, because, we think of that and we're like, yeah, I mean, or so I hear, labor is painful. And it can last a long time. I did not know that until we were talking about labor. I had no idea. It could take a day or longer. That's insane. They don't tell us that in school. Or I don't remember it. But that's not the only thing that can be toil and difficulty. What do we look at when we see the stories throughout Genesis? We see, I think there may be an occasion or two where there's pain in childbirth. Isn't there? There's a mom who dies in childbirth. So that's real. But then what else do we see? We see at least twice infertility. Toil, difficulty with conceiving, infertility. This seems to predict that there's going to be difficulty having children now. And don't we see different stories throughout of not just physically being infertile, but then the relational aspect of trying to have kids? Man, it's all over the map throughout the book of Genesis. People doing horrible, horrible things to one another. People doing horrible things to women in particular, as it relates to wanting to have children. We see it all over, example after example after example, toil, agony over conception. We see, so we see with Sarah experiences infertility. Abraham experiences famine. And so that's the curse to the ground. We see in both their domains, they're experiencing the curse, Abraham and Sarah. But what was God's promise to Abraham? He promises two things in particular. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. You're going to make great nations even. But you're going to have a seed, you're going to have a child, and you're going to have land. And follow the story of Abraham all the way through. And it's one promise after another. And it's all about these two promises that God makes. And what do we see the curse involving and affecting? It's affecting fertility, and it's affecting work on the land. And all throughout, this curse, though, is turned into a new test for Abraham and Sarah. So to refresh your memory of this story, Abraham, after Babylon, is called by God. He says, go leave your family, just like Genesis 2. A man shall leave his father and mother. Abraham is called to leave his family, go to a new land. And what does Abraham do? He goes. God says, go. He goes. And we get this whole story of as he's going by trees and on mountains, and he's doing all these worship sessions, and he's building altars, and he's worshiping God. And once he gets to the land, it doesn't take him that long to get to the land. He gets to the land, and immediately he leaves. He leaves the land. Do you know why? There's a famine. Do you know where he goes? Egypt. Egypt. Do things go well in Egypt? No. He says, Sarah, you're attractive. Why don't you say you're my sister so nothing happens? He leaves his wife high and dry to be hurt and abused. And she is. And what ends up happening is they end up leaving Egypt, and they take a bunch of spoils with them. And somehow later on in the story we find out that there's an Egyptian slave woman, Hagar, who must have come from when their time in Egypt. Hagar, one of the spoils of Egypt, is a person. That's not right. That's not right. And then what did they do to Hagar? Does it go well with Hagar? No. And so right here, I will surely multiply your pain in conception. And in pain, you're going to bring forth children. It's all there. It's like God is lamenting because he sees where this whole series of events is going to cascade. He says, yeah, it starts with the simple fruit. But man, I'm going to see generation after generation of people being hurt. No wonder God laments. It's like he's plopped down right when they're shutting off the safety valve, and he's like, oh, I know where this is going to go. I know what's going to happen now. One small mistake, and all these problems are going to be unleashed. And we go on to the second half of that verse. Your desire will be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. That verse is so simple and easy, I don't think we need to talk about it. I think we all get what that verse is saying. Nobody's ever argued about Genesis 3:16 before, have we? If you're familiar, there has been a lot of argument over Genesis 3:16. a lot of scrutiny and a lot of possible interpretations, lots of possibilities. The question is, when we talk about desire, your desire will be for your husband. Is that a good desire or a bad desire? And he will rule over you. Is that rule a good rule or a bad rule? And so we've got 4 options. Plus, plus, minus, minus, plus, minus, minus, plus. 4 options for how to take this. I was raised, and a lot of times how you're raised will affect how you take this verse. And so it's always difficult. It's really almost impossible to remove your biases and kind of what you want the verse to mean from how you interpret it. But we do our best. So I was raised where it was positive, positive. We weren't so concerned about the desire part. We looked past that. Okay, there's desire, sure. But I was always told that the rule part was positive. This is a positive thing. It might be a positive thing in light of the fall. You know, this might be some sort of concession. It might be some sort of punishment on Eve. You know, she was the one who was deceived. Now we got to make sure that her husband's in charge because she, you know, her husband wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. So let's make sure we know that there is a hierarchy. There is a design in creation. This is how it was presented to me. And that's one way you can take it. And smarter people than me take it that way. That is not the way I take the verse. So, of course, I'm going to argue for it the way I tend to take it. I tend to take it as negative, negative. It's a negative kind of desire, and it's a negative kind of rule. A couple of reasons why. One is in the immediate context, these are negative things we're talking about. These are negative consequences we're talking about. We take a lot of what God's saying here, and we've got to see how we take it. So we can take it as a lament, like I've been talking about, and if it's a lament, then it's something that is about to happen, and God may or may not have active involvement in what's happening. It might be more of he's predicting what's about to happen. Do you see what I'm saying, the difference? So is he commanding these things to happen? Is he saying that I'm going to do this? Or is he saying it's going to happen? In some ways, we talk, just the last thing we said, it does seem as though God is actively going to do something to bring about something like infertility, is what he's talking about. But it also seems to imply that there's things that God isn't going to actively do, but are just going to happen because of the fall and because of the world we live in now after the fall. I think as I read this, I see it as something that is a consequence of what's going to happen, not necessarily something that God is intentionally, actively involved in making happen. Okay? How I grew up was always, this was a positive, so this was something we were supposed to do. So not saying what I'm going to do, God saying, here's what I'm going to do, or here's what you're going to do, but more, here's what you should do. And I don't see that either. And what I read here is these are negative consequences of the fall. Because we did what was right in our own eyes, here's what's going to happen. Your desire is going to be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Do we see throughout Genesis some sort of negative desire? Do we see throughout Genesis wives deceiving or scheming their husbands? We do. We see that. Wanting to get their way and tricking their husbands. Yeah, we do see that. Do we see throughout the stories of Genesis husbands mistreating their wives and being jerks toward their wives, not protecting, but laying them high and dry? We just talked about, yes. Yeah. Do we see men abusing women? Yes, we see that. This word for rule isn't exactly the same word, but it's a synonym for the word that we've seen earlier in Genesis 1. It's one we keep going back to. And God made them in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. He said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the earth. What was the ideal portrait was that man and woman are ruling together over creation as partners with God. Delegated rulers. This is what we're called to be. Co-partners with God and together. Here, what we have is not man and woman partnering in rule, but that the woman is not a partner of the rule of the man, but an object of the rule. So the woman now is in the place of an animal. Because Genesis 1 was where the man and woman are to rule the animals. So now if the woman is being ruled, now she's treated like an animal. Do we see that in the Bible? We do. We see what, in fact, sometimes there's even word plays with names and things where women's names are the same names as animals. Women treated like objects, women treated like animals. This is why God laments. He sees the cascade of effects. It's the Chernobyl. It's one bad decision after another, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion. It's eating the fruit, realizing we're naked, running and hiding, and blaming one another. It's now we're in a situation where we're no longer safe with each other. We're no longer on each other's team anymore. What does it look like moving forward where we are in conflict and there's difficulty and dissension between the man and his wife? Well, it looks like this, I believe. Your desire will be for your husband, and he'll rule over you. Another really important, if you're going to interpret this verse, you've got to look at God's words to Cain. So you can just go to the very next chapter. This is where Cain's filled with jealousy. He's angry at his brother Abel. Verse 7 of chapter 4, God's talking to Cain. He says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? Again, God's asking questions, just like he did to Cain's parents. He's asking questions. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Do you know what kinds of things crouch? Lions crouch. Lions are pouncing, ready to attack. Sin, this is the first time we see sin in the Bible, and sin is pictured as an animal ready to attack, some sort of predator ready to attack. And then we see its desire, same word, desire is for you. This is a predatory desire. Sin is crouching, ready to attack Cain. But you must rule over it. It's the same words, desire and rule. But God is saying you must rule. So ruling that which is desiring you is a good thing when that thing is sin. It's a good thing when that's an animal. Not so good when that is your partner in ruling creation, to rule over the woman. One more thing I want to say. We're going to go to 17 before we come up with some conclusions here. So 17, and to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and you've eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat. Curses the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. How many times did we say eat? I think it was 3. 3 times. Eat. The punishment matches the crime. He ate, and now the consequence is eating. But then there's blessing, because remember the snake is eating dust, but here he gets to eat bread and plants. By the sweat of your face you'll eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For you are dust, and to the dust you shall return. There's a little mystery and a little riddle here, because God said, on the day that you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die. But he's talking to him. Does he die that day? No, it doesn't really look like it. And yet, his death is a guarantee. This is already the beginning seeds of this whole already not yet throughout the Bible. It's like, apparently in God's mind, he's already dead because it's as certain as anything else. He's going to die. So in a sense, he's already dead. This is why the writer of Ephesians says, we were dead in our trespasses and sins. Well, we're alive. We're zombies or something like that? Well, in a sense, we're already dead. Yet God made us alive. Or in Ephesians, it says, and he seated us up in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. We're like, I'm sitting in a pew right now. I'm not in the clouds right now. But yet, it's such a guaranteed, it's as good as done. It's already done, and yet we're still waiting for it. So we see that there. What I do actually, that's not what I wanted to point out too much though. What I want to point out is because you listen to the voice, one Hebrew word really short is kol. It's actually Q, but I think it's like pronounced with a K, so Q-O-L, kol. Just pronounce kol, just like what you don't want in your Christmas stocking, kol. Kol is the word for sound or voice. It's similar to ruach, because ruach is wind or breath. So when it has to do with people, it's breath. When it has to do with trees, is wind. Kol, when it has to do with the trees making a sound, is a sound. When it has to do with what comes out of a person's mouth, it's voice. And so, Adam listened to the voice of his wife, to the call of his wife. We don't get that whole exchange. There might have been some other conversation it seems like God's referring to, listening to the voice. All it says is that Adam took and ate himself. Then the eyes of both were open. Yeah, she also gave it to her husband. So we don't see any dialogue between Eve and Adam, but apparently there must have been some conversation. You listen to the voice of your wife, and then right after they eat, they hide because they hear a sound of the Lord God in the ruach of the day. In the cool of the day, the Lord God is walking around doing a stroll, and they hear the sound, the call. So the Lord has his own call, but you didn't listen to the call of the Lord. You listened to the call of your wife. Throughout the story of the Bible and throughout the story of your life, doesn't matter whose call you listen to, whose voice you're going to pay attention to. Is that going to have some devastating or positive consequences? Whose voice you'll listen to? Today, we hear lots of voices. No, it doesn't mean we're going crazy. We just have so many voices telling us what's right and wrong and what we should do, how we should live. He says, man, you got to listen to the call of the Lord. You got to listen to the voice of God in your life. Because if you don't, there's going to be consequences for that. Pretty rough stuff. They're going to be exiled out of Eden. They're going to die. It's as good as done, their death. In the meantime, there's going to be famines and infertility, all kinds of problems with childbearing, all kinds of problems with work, all kinds of difficulty all over, curse and scarcity and conflict. This is all here in one story, in one short poem. We see all of this. Question is, did God overreact? Is this a little too much, God? How do we see this? Well, there's really some interesting things I've heard. One is some of the things I've already kind of talked about is this is a lament. A lot of the things God is saying is going to happen isn't necessarily the stuff that God will do directly. So often when we talk about the wrath of God, Romans 1 says the wrath of God is God handing us over to our own choices. He's lamenting about what we're already going to do. It's like this. It's like a fish who dreams of freedom one day. And your little goldfish is swimming around that bowl saying, one day I'm going to be free. And then all of a sudden you come home and your poor goldfish found his freedom. And that freedom was short-lived. That's what we do. God's wrath is saying, you want freedom? Well, what you want as freedom is ultimately going to kill you. The wrath of God says, very well then, I'm going to honor your decision. How do we reconcile a loving God that lets so many bad things happen? I think that's a really important way to see it. At least one way for me. I think another thing is, He originally says, be fruitful, multiply. He